Happy New Year, everybody! Welcome back to another Watching the Meta video, the weekly series where we take a look at the Magic Online results, sometimes some paper tournaments. Spoiler alert, we're probably going to have a paper tournament to talk about next week. And we take a look at the metagame for Modern, Pioneer, and Standard. And we take a look and see what's winning. We highlight the winners of the challenges and a couple of spicy ones along the way, excuse me. And again, before we start this video, I just wanted to say, let's welcome in the new year with probably the most successful series of videos that we've done on this channel over the past entire year. You guys seem to like these style videos a lot, so maybe there's some more space in the future for upcoming different series and stuff like that. So again, thank you for all the support over the past year. You guys, I would not be doing this if it wasn't for you guys who keep coming back. So thank you guys for watching. And with all of that said, let us start the new year off with some Modern. And this graph that you see here is kind of all over the place. There's a lot of different colors and shapes and sizes on this graph, but the most important thing that I want to point your attention towards is Demir. So last week, 3.9%. This week, all the way up to 15.2%. So with the recent unbans, there's been a lot of turnover and a lot of churn with people trying to figure out what are the best decks of the new metagame. It seems to me that there is a pretty defined set of three. Well, I guess two. I was going to say Mardu, Boros, and Demir, but Mardu and Boros, you can kind of interchange with them a little bit. So Energy and Demir still seem to be the two best decks. Now, if you think about it, neither of those decks are really a looting or an opal or a zenith or a twin deck. So where's the vanguards? That is a little bit of a tougher question to answer. Grinding Breach plays opal, Brutescale sometimes plays opal, Titan plays zenith. The looting decks they're not really popping up as much. They're still winning a little bit here and there, not nearly as much as we had initially thought. So as we try and figure out what this new metagame is going to look like, it seems to be Energy and Blue-Black are, at least for now, the two decks to beat. Speaking of which, the challenges, which there were 8 of, were won by 2 Boros, 2 Demir, 2 Ruby Storm, a Jeskai Control, and a Temur Eldrazi. And with all of that, I have 4 decks that we can take a look at here. And the first one that I want to point your attention to is Slivers. In 2020, well, I was going to say 2025, but this was actually last week, so it's still 2024. Maybe Slivers were okay back then. But this is, for those of you who haven't seen, this is kind of the combo here. So Morophon the Boundless is a changeling, which means it's all creature types, including Vampire. So you can use Sorin to cheat out Morophon, say that 10 times fast. And you choose a creature type when it enters, and creatures of that type cost WUBRG less to cast, which means you can cast Sliver Legions and the first Sliver for free. The first Sliver has Cascade, and you basically just keep going and you go through your entire deck. Now, the new card that we have here is Faithless Looting, which Faithless Looting doesn't seem to synergize with Sorin, but it does allow you to play Goryo's Vengeance as another way to get back Morophon. So people have tried Sorin Morophon before. Maybe Faithless Looting is a pretty good upgrade for it. And then basically the kill condition of this deck is you keep cascading until you eventually hit Cloud Shredder Sliver, which gives all of your Slivers flying in haste. And because they all get pumped by Sliver Legion, your opponent just takes 1 million damage on that turn. So, pretty cool deck. Next up for you guys, we have Billster 47 in 10th place. I have seen this deck pop up quite a bit, and I will say I haven't tried it myself yet, but it seems pretty interesting. So for people who have maybe not followed the Legacy format, as Glaring Fleshraker was not appearing on my screen there for a second, this card is a huge part of Eldrazi decks. But not only Eldrazi decks, it is also a huge part of what is called Forge combo. Now, granted, in Legacy, that deck did just get taken down a peg by removing Vexing Bubble from the format, but it's utilizing fast mana with stuff like Ancient Tomb, City of Traders, what is it, like Planar Nexus, I think, where it's like, it's all Tron lands, or I don't remember. Maybe, let me know in the comments. I think it's Planar Nexus. But basically fast mana, 0 mana cards, like they play Lotus Petal, I think they might play Mox Opal, and then what happens is when you have Fleshraker and Mystic Forge in play, you can play all of your zeros. Now, we don't quite have as many good zeros in this format, but we do have Ornithopter, perfectly serviceable, Memnite, also perfectly serviceable. And every time you're playing a 0 mana spell off of your deck, you're getting another Scion token, which gives you then more mana. And you even have the Mirror Enforcers. We have 4 Frogmere Enforcer, 4 Sojourner's Companion, and 2 Mirror Enforcer. And then eventually you play a bunch of free spells, you cast a big Kozilek's Command, because you've generated all of those spawn tokens from playing free spells, and then that command deals more damage with Fleshraker, and you kind of just kill them in one shot. Now, I feel like there's maybe not enough fast mana, but Labyrinth, Temple, and the newly acquired Mox Opal maybe might be enough for a deck like this. All right, I need your help. I was having a difficult time trying to figure out what to label this deck as, so let me know in the comments section, wrong answers only, what we should label this deck as. I was going to say Maverick, but then green-black lands, but there's also white cards in it. It would take me an hour to go through every single card in this deck, but just to give you a TLDR, it's utilizing White of the Reliquary to search for powerful lands. You get to tap, sack a creature, search for a land. You're utilizing Grist, or excuse me, not Grist, Green Sun Zenith to kind of help give you some consistency at finding White of the Reliquary. And then you have a bunch of interesting tutor targets. You have like Aftermath Analyst, which can rebuy a bunch of lands. You have stuff like, if there's an Enduring Vitality in here to let all of your tokens tap for mana. You have, some good bullets like Fungus, Scavenging Ooze. And then I think the big kind of end game plan here is eventually get the Necro Blue into play, which is a card from MH3. It is a 4-drop for a 2/7. That's a lot of toughness. And basically it has a lot of words on it, but it effectively gives you a Field of the Dead on a 4-mana creature. So you're utilizing ways to put lands into play like Arboreal Grazer. You eventually get to the Necrobloom, make a bunch of tokens that way. There's a lot going on. I mean, the mana base, you have a ton of utility lands to search for, like Blast Zone, Bajuka Bog. You have Rot Farm to pick up Boseiju, Sajiri Step, Restless Prairie to pump your tokens. A lot of cool stuff going on here. And if you are a Maverick fan, this one might be a deck for you. Personally, I'm not a Maverick fan, but I am a Rhino fan, and this is what I wanted to highlight. Now, this deck list is a deck list that you probably could have played 5 months ago. Now, 5 months ago, we were dealing with the One Ring and Boros Energy and all that stuff, so it wasn't necessarily maybe good 5 months ago. But I do think, and this is why I wanted to highlight this, because there's been a pretty big uptick in Rhinos, if you notice, if you take a look back to that graph from earlier. And I think part of that is due to the fact that the One Ring is gone. And with the One Ring gone, you don't really have that tension of you play Rhinos, they play Ring, you can't attack them for a turn, they get a bunch of extra cards to like actually trade for your Rhino tokens and not feel like they're trading all of their resources away because they're getting more cards off the ring. But yeah, this deck just, the one thing I will mention, there appears to be a split camp on whether or not to play Sign of Draco and Leyline of the Guild Pact or not. Personally, I'm a pretty big fan of those two cards against the energy decks. If you can stick Leyline plus Scion, they have a real hard time answering that. None of their kill spells work. They can't really attack because they only have small creatures. So I personally like those two cards, but I have seen quite a few lists with the package and without the package, so keep that in mind. But yeah, Rhinos are back, baby. Now we are going to move over to Pioneer, and I don't know what to say. This format is interesting. Interesting is not the word that I was trying to use. Look, I will say this. I used to play a ton of Pioneer. I love the format. I don't really know exactly where the enjoyment stopped for me. It might have something to do with the announcement of no RCQs for 2025, because it feels like people just don't have as much incentive to brew or try new things. There's no like big tournaments coming up. There might be a Spotlight series, but I don't think they've announced like officially a Pioneer Spotlight series. But look at this. Half of the format is Rakdos decks. You know, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Maybe they should ban a card from Rakdos. Maybe they should ban Fable. Maybe they should ban Thoughtseize. I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of hateful comments about that one. But I don't know. The format just, it looks pretty stale. I mean, last week it was 23 Demons, 12 Prowess. Now it's half of the format is those two decks. There's still some stuff here. I mean, Spirits is making a bit of a comeback. Devotion, Jund Sacrifice. But it's just, there's so many Rakdos decks. I did find a couple of decks, though, that are not Rakdos. Now, I will tell you, the challenges were won by 2 Rakdos Prowess, 1 Rakdos Demons, 1 Enigmatic, and 1, drumroll please, Merfolk from Claudio. Shout out to Claudio. Claudio is, I think Claudio still does some streaming, does a lot of content production for the Pioneer format. It's kind of his baby. He has come up with a really sweet looking Merfolk deck. Now, I've seen some Merfolk pop up a little bit. I know Nikachu played it in the NRG championships at the end of the year. I've seen a couple of lists floating around. But for people who haven't seen this, this is, I guess you could call it a combo deck, where you were trying to establish, well, I guess now that I say that, this one only has one forensic researcher, but there is oh no, he's playing 4 Kiora's Follower. Okay. So the combo is Deep-Root Pilgrimage, which is an enchantment that says you make a 1/1 whenever one or more non-token merfolks become tapped. And then if you have 2 Kiora's Follower or Forensic Researcher in play, you can tap and untap each other of those to make infinite merfolk. Now, you might think to yourself, well, getting 2 of that card in play seems a little difficult. Well, that's where Cauldron comes in, because even if you have, like, say you have a Kiora's Follower and it died, you can put it under the Cauldron, and then if you just have 2 random bodies with counters on them, you can also establish the combo there, because each one of those will have the ability of Kiora's Follower. So really cool deck here, and then you're utilizing Cenote Scout as your kind of your 1-drop here, as well as Kumena Speaker, so you got some cheap creatures there, and then you have Kumena and Vodelian Hexcatcher as kind of your lords and payoffs. And then the other cool thing is Kiora the Rising Tide is a merfolk, but it also helps put those combo pieces in the graveyard if you also have Cauldron. So really cool deck. Shout out to Claudio. Next up, from Cute Chandra 19 in 21st place, this is Boros Goblins. So utilizing some sacrifice outlets here, specifically Skirk Prospector, to sacrifice all of your goblins and then return them with Raise the Past. Each time you're going through those sacrifice loops, you do get some other value along the way. Rundveld Hordemaster is a big one, where every time you sack a goblin, you get to exile a card. If it's a goblin, you can play that card. You also have Cacophony Scamp, which, when you sacrifice it, it deals 1 damage, which might not seem like a lot, but if you have stuff like Rundveld Hordemaster in play or other ways to pump it, like Battlecry Goblin, you can pump up the Scamp, sacrifice it, get it back with Raise the Past, maybe find another Lord to pump it again. You see where this is going. Yep, I mean, it's a red deck, so we got 4 Fables, nothing to see there. I've seen Goblins decks floating around before, but I haven't really seen them with Raise the Past. And this one maybe might give me an opportunity to play Pioneer again. Next up, we have Karate Dom in 3rd place, who actually made a pretty deep run in one of the challenges with Esper Greasefang. Now, we've seen Esper Greasefang decks before. They do have some new tools here, specifically Kiora the Rising Tide. But the Esper Greasefang shell is utilizing discard outlets like Kiora the Rising Tide, Evangel of Synthesis as a 2-mana creature that you can draw discard. But the one important thing that I want to mention here is Raffine Scheming Seer. So Raffine is really powerful. It is a card that kind of provides a ton of pressure because you attack and you connive X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. The important thing that you may not realize about Raffine is its creature type, where you see next to legendary creature it says Sphinx. The fact that Raffine is a demon and is a discard outlet allows us to then play Unholy Annex, which is an extremely powerful card in the Rakdos Demons decks. And this is a really cool take on Greasefang, where you have this kind of Annex, Thoughtseize, Raffine mid-range plan, but also you can still just go turn 2 Evangel, turn 3 Greasefang, and try to one-shot your opponent there. So really cool deck list that is kind of buffed up by the presence of Kiora the Rising Tide, and again, shout out to Karate Dom. Sweet deck. Speaking of Unholy Annex, this card seems to be everywhere in Pioneer. It's 30% of the Rakdos Demons decks, and it is also in Merfolk Demons? So hear me out on this one. You have cheap creatures like Mockingbird, Moon Circuit Hacker. Well, this is enabled by your cheap creatures, but Mockingbird, Triton Shorestalker. Triton Shorestalker is a 1-mana 1/1 Merfolk that can't be blocked. So, Triton Shorestalker, powerful with ninjutsu. So it enables both Moon Circuit Hacker and Kaito Bane of Nightmares, right? But it also happens to be a Merfolk creature type. Hexcatcher, coming in clutch again. Floodpit Drowner, also a Merfolk. Mockingbird also can be a Merfolk. And then, you don't have any, well, I guess you have Silvergill Adept, which is pretty sweet because you can Silvergill Adept, and then on turn 2, then turn 3, you can go Kaito, pick up the Adept, and draw another card. So a lot of cool stuff going on here. Shout out to Traft in 13th place. And now that we have Modern and Pioneer out of the way, we need to discuss the Spotlight Series in Atlanta coming up, which, by the way, I will be there, so be sure to stop by and say hi. I have like 30 of these Cool Stuff Rhino tokens, so again, shout out to Cool Stuff for sponsoring this video. If you would like one of these signed or maybe not signed, hit me up. I'll be there. And the format is Standard, and Standard is definitely seeing some shifts. So Demir mid-range, right around, not the same, but 27 last week, 21 this week, so it's decreasing a little bit. Golgari about the same, Boros Prowess, slight downtick, Mono Red, slight downtick, Gruul, bit of an uptick there. Overlords, pretty big downtick. Azorius Convoke, slight uptick. The one piece on this graph that you may notice is significantly larger than last week. If you look at last week's graph, it's not even labeled here because the percentage was so small, but Esper Pixie is now the third most played deck in Standard. This is in basically an overnight success story. One person, forget who it was, posted a list. I believe it was Trellin, who was the initial 5-0 that I saw, and I saw they posted a list, and then everybody else just started, picking up the same list, and now it's everywhere. And to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a pretty big part of Atlanta, so you're going to need to have a plan for this deck. Now, that being said, there is both Obstinate Baloth and Wiltleaf Liege, because, the Pixie deck is very good at making you discard cards with Hopeless Nightmare, so keep that in mind if you're a green or a white deck. Now, as far as what I expect people to play in Atlanta, it's going to be a lot of Dimir, it's going to be a lot of red decks. Past those two, if this is any indication, you're going to have your mid-range section, which is Golgari, Dimir. You're going to have your red section, which is Boros, Mono Red, Gruul. That combination of macro archetypes probably, I would guess, takes up roughly a little over 50% of the format. But past those two macro archetypes, I would not be surprised if Pixie was the next most played deck. So past those three, then you have maybe, I wouldn't also be surprised. I know it's only 2.5% here, but I would certainly expect to see an uptick in Domain, because I think, again, if you can, I feel like Domain is just an extremely powerful deck. The mana can be a little sketchy at times, but that's kind of my Atlanta prediction. As far as the challenges, there was actually 4 challenges and a super qualifier. The challenges were won by 2 Golgari mid, 1 Dimir mid, 1 Gruul Prowess, and then the super qualifier was won by Mono Red. Now, as far as the Spice Corner is concerned, I got 4 for you. So first of all, we're looking at DB_Dykeman. For those of you who don't know, Steven Dykeman on Twitch and streams quite a bit of, I believe he's been doing mostly Standard recently, but he cooked up this really sweet blue-black arcane proxy deck, and he made it all the way to top 4. So this is taking some pages out of the Pixie Books deck, Pixie Decks book, I don't really know what I'm trying to say there, where it's utilizing This Town Ain't Big Enough and Storm Chaser's talent to kind of have that engine going, because that is an extremely powerful engine that a lot of decks utilize. He's pairing that with cantrips, Sleight of Hand, and Chart of Course. Chart of Course is cool because it can fill the graveyard to put a good spell into the graveyard for Arcane Proxy, which it's got a lot of text on it, but it's basically a 3-mana Snapcaster Mage. Think of it like that. But you can play the spell as long as it's mana value 2 or less. It's equal to less than or equal to its power. So if you prototype it, it has 2 power, so it's mana value 2 or less. So keep that in mind. But a bunch of kill spells, cut down, go for the throat, more cantrips with Opt, and then Thunder Trap Trader to kind of find all of the pieces. And they're really just utilizing Arcane Proxy as a 2-for-1, just a straight up, hey, play this, here's my kill spell, kill your creature. Also nice that you can This Town Ain't Big Enough to return the proxy and maybe a talent, maybe something else. So a lot of cool stuff going on here. Dykeman made it all the way to 4th place, so maybe there's something here. I'm probably going to try this one tonight on stream. Next up, we have DB Booed Oz. Let me know in the comments. I'm actually not familiar with Booed Oz. I know the DB is the Daybreak account, so I'm sure this person is a content creator. I just want to shout them out because I'm not familiar with the Booed-Oz. So let me know in the comments. But this is Merfolk, and I believe, I'm not 100% positive, but this I think is pretty similar to what Nikachu played at that NRG Championships, because he played, surprisingly, Merfolk in all 3 formats. But there's some cool stuff here where you have, look, the 1-drops aren't great, okay? I'll say that. You get Cenote Scout, which is good, but Mistway Spy is just 1 mana 1/1 flyer. Mockingbird can act as a Merfolk 1-drop too, so you kind of effectively have 12 1-drops, which for a tribal deck with Lords, that's not bad. And then you're pairing that with, same thing, Vidalian Hexcatcher, Tishana's Tideminer is a 4 of, also a Merfolk, also a phenomenal card. You still have the Pilgrimages. The removal spells, well, we don't get to play nearly as good ones as we do in Modern, but we have Unable to Scream, because that's all we have. And then Schooner is pretty cool because the way that Schooner works with Deep-Root Pilgrimage is you can actually over-crew it. And what I mean by that is you can use one creature to crew it, and then after it becomes a creature, you can use another creature to then crew it again. Because Pilgrimage is one or more. So it only, if you tap 5 Merfolk for like a big attack, you only get one of those tokens. So Schooner is kind of a way to break that symmetry, and I do like that quite a bit. But yeah, also Soulstone Sanctuary in the database, more Merfolk. So Merfolk may be good in every format, ? Next up here we have XX Gimli XX 19th place. I was streaming last night, and I had several people come into my chat asking me if I was going to play this deck. I haven't tried it yet, but maybe I'll have to give it a shot tonight. So you have a lot of self-mill with Branchwood Prowler, Gnawing Vermin, and Overlord of the Baelmerk, and as well as Rubblebell Maverick. So a lot of ways to self-mill. You're then putting a bunch of creatures into your graveyard to then get discounted large creatures like Hollow Marauder and Huskburster Swarm. Both Marauder and Swarm and Overlord of the Baelmerk all happen to be 5 mana spells, or 5 or greater. So you have a bunch of Beanstalk triggers. Overwhelming Remorse as a removal spell. If you have 4 creatures in your graveyard, it costs 1 mana, but it still triggers Beans. So you have a lot of good synergy going on there. And then the new card that I have not seen before, but makes a lot of sense when you're putting a bunch of creatures into your graveyard, is Season of Loss, where these seasons are, you get 5 paws, you choose, so you pay some number of paws. The 3 paw mode is each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard, which presumably you probably have a lot of those. And 5 mana also triggers Beanstalk. So I've seen variations of this Dredge deck before, but this kind of like Beanstalk plus Season of Loss incorporation looks pretty good, and I gotta try this one myself. Shout out to Gimli, really sweet looking deck list. And we are going to end today's video with some more Goblins. We saw Goblins in Pioneer. This one is only mono red because Raise the Past, while legal in Standard, we don't really have good Goblin sacrifice outlets. No Skirk Prospector, but just a lot of the similar stuff. Cacophony Scamp, Fanatical Firebrand. Hordemaster is cool because you can sacrifice Firebrand and then still have hit the trigger off of the Runbound Hordemaster. Sear Slicer Goblin. Raid, make a 1/1. Squee Dubious Monarch. Wait, that's not a Goblin. What's that doing here? I mean, look, maybe we ran out of Goblin creature types. This one's, pretty good, making it so your opponent can't gain life, and if they're playing a bunch of those filthy domain lands, getcha. Just absolutely getcha. And then a whole bunch of burn spells. Burst Lightning, Lightning Strike, and I actually don't know what this card does, so I'm going to read it for you here. So it's 3 mana instant, make 2 1/1s, or creatures you control get +2/+0. So that's kind of cool. You have a lot of cheap 1-drops. You can also pump your Cacophony Scamp, so when those die in combat, they get a little bit more damage that way. And Dragon Fodder as well. So a bunch of ways to make tokens. Pretty cool looking deck list. Not sure if Goblins have what they need, but it looks at least pretty cool on paper. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the very first video of 2025. Again, I thank you all for supporting the channel. It's been a wild ride over the past couple of years. We got some new stuff on the horizon for 2025. So I hope you will join me along this journey. And thank you all so very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. And until next time, adios.